John Lee revealed what happened when President Xi Jinping greeted him at the NPC meeting yesterday. A government task force reviewing health check requirements for elderly commercial vehicle drivers. And Rishi Sunak says anyone arriving illegally in the UK will be prevented from staying. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Chief Executive John Lee returned to Hong Kong from Beijing today. He revealed what happened when President Xi Jinping singled him out to greet him amid the attendees of the National People's Congress meeting yesterday. Lee also told the press he met with Xia Baolong, head of the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, who reminded the SAR to stay vigilant even in times of stability. Jackie Lin with more.
This is the moment Chief Executive John Lee was brought into the limelight. It happened yesterday at the close of the opening ceremony of the first plenary session of the 14th National People's Congress. That's when President Xi Jinping stopped to greet Lee when he was leaving the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. So, what exactly did Xi say? That's a question reporters asked when the city's leader returned to Hong Kong this afternoon. Lee said President Xi expressed care and encouragement, which would motivate him to work harder to help Hong Kong become a better home for its citizens. While in the capital, Lee also met with Xia Baolong, director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, to whom he reported Hong Kong's latest situation and the work of the SAR government. Lee said Xia encouraged the administration to keep grinding and do the real work for Hong Kong's economy to go full steam ahead. There's also a reminder to Hong Kong from the top Beijing official to stay vigilant while in times of stability. On that, Lee said security risks are still lurking in the territory, and the administration would nip any destructive forces in the bud. That's by better risk management and by beefing up the gathering of intelligence. On questions about the legislative work on Article 23 of the Basic Law, the city's leader left without responding. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Mainland authorities said they're hopeful about the realization of economic growth in the nation this year, with the target being a growth of around 5%. The National Development and Reform Commission noted that the mainland economy is experiencing a noticeable rebound and expects continual growth. It added that China's gross domestic product, consumer prices, and employment payments are important indicators showing that the nation has performed well among the world's major economies. Regarding the government's goal of stabilizing consumer prices, authorities stressed the importance of strengthening market supervision and providing a steady supply and production of consumer goods. The government says it has already tasked an expert group with reviewing health check requirements for commercial drivers. This comment comes after a recent spate of taxi accidents involving elderly drivers. Mimo Sangai with more.
This accident in Fortress Hill yesterday involved an 84-year-old taxi driver. The accident, along with some others that also involved elderly drivers, renewed public concern about whether there should be a cap on the age of all types of commercial drivers. Currently in Hong Kong, only bus drivers are required to retire after the age of 60, while minibus and taxi drivers do not have to meet such an age requirement. Looking at countries such as Singapore, taxi drivers have an age gap imposed on them. Those who are over 75 have to retire. Nonetheless, Kwon Sing, chairman of the Taxi Dealers and Owners Association, believes putting an age cap on drivers will only worsen the problem of insufficient manpower. Also said old age does not necessarily mean drivers are in bad health conditions, adding that it is unfair to take their working rights away just because they are old. Lawmaker Ben Chan, meanwhile, said it is challenging for authorities to solve two problems: population aging and insufficient manpower at the same time. Japan has an aging population but allows drivers over 70 years old to continue their careers under several criteria, including passing eye and cognition tests. In contrast, Hong Kong drivers of the same age only need to do a body check at least once every 3 years. However, the government does not specify the kind of tests they require from drivers. Transport Commissioner Ursula said the government has already formed a task force to consider making the body checks stricter for commercial drivers. Mimosa Nai, TVB News.
In an interview with the Mail on Sunday, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that anyone arriving illegally in the UK will be prevented from staying. This under new legislation, which is expected to be set out next week. Under current practice, asylum seekers who reach Britain are often able to remain in the country to have their case heard. The newspaper reported that a new law to tackle the issue is due to be set out on Tuesday. It said that under the new regulations, asylum claims from those who arrive on small boats will be ruled inadmissible, and they would be removed and permanently banned from returning. Last year, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced a deal with Rwanda to send tens of thousands of migrants to the Central African nation. The policy has faced a legal battle after the first planned deportation flight was blocked by a last-minute injunction granted by the European Court of Human Rights. It was ruled lawful by London's High Court in December, but opponents are seeking to appeal that verdict. The station master at Greece's Larissa railway station was detained pending trial on charges related to the country's deadliest train crash. The man was arrested on March 1st, hours after a passenger train with more than 350 people on board collided head-on with a freight train near the city of Larissa in central Greece. Meanwhile, clashes broke out between police and demonstrators in Athens on the fringes of a protest by students and railway workers over the train crash. Tracy Furness reports.
Felony charges were brought on Thursday against the 59-year-old station master for disrupting transport and putting lives at risk. The man, who cannot be named under Greek law, appeared before a magistrate on Sunday to respond to the charges before being detained. His lawyer told reporters that the detention was expected due to the significance of the case. He added his client was devastated and had told the magistrate the truth without fear. Meanwhile, thousands demonstrated in Athens Sunday outside Parliament to express anger and grief over the deadly train collision that killed 57 and injured dozens. Among the estimated 10,000 demonstrators, many were railway workers. The proper safety measures must be taken, both in the work environment and on the lines. But because companies put profits above workers and passengers, they were not taken all these years, said this railway worker. Despite the continuous warnings of the workers, there was criminal indifference by those responsible to our requests over the safety systems. And that is what led to this tragic accident, said Kostas Yanidounas, head of the Railway Drivers' Union. Some clashes erupted between police and protesters after thousands took to the streets over the crash. Police used tear gas and stun grenades on a small group of protesters who had hurled petrol bombs before dispersing to nearby streets. Railway workers, who also lost colleagues in the accident, have staged rotating walkouts since Wednesday to denounce cost-cutting and underinvestment in the country's rail infrastructure. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
The founder of the Moscow-backed Wagner Mercenary Force said a lack of ammunition could prevent Russia from achieving its goal of capturing Bakhmut in Donetsk. Yevgeny Prigozhin said the whole front will collapse just as his forces are about to overwhelm Ukrainian troops in the city after 7 months of fighting. He was reported to have made the comments through Telegram. The Wagner private army is at the forefront of the Bakhmut offensive, but Prigozhin is said to be questioning Moscow's ability to provide them with more ammunition. For now, we are trying to figure out the reason. Is it just ordinary bureaucracy or a betrayal? He was quoted as saying. The U.S. has taken a major step to support the Ukrainian military. For the first time, Ukrainian pilots are in America preparing to train on F-16 fighter jets. More from NBC.
For the first time, Ukrainian pilots are in the U.S. working with U.S. military pilots to assess their skills and familiarize them on new equipment and aircraft like the F-16. The two Ukrainian pilots are at a U.S. military base in Tucson, Arizona, working on simulators that mimic various aircraft. They are not flying actual planes, according to defense officials. And as many as 10 more Ukrainian pilots are expected to join them in the coming weeks. This comes as Ukrainian President Zelensky has repeatedly asked the U.S. for F-16s, but the Biden administration has resisted. Last week, the Pentagon's top policy official told Congress F-16s could take at least 18 months to deliver and cost billions of dollars, saying Pentagon leaders instead are focused on weapons and equipment they can deliver more immediately.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen held talks with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his cabinet at the start of a two-day meeting near Berlin. The pair discussed green technology, trade deals, and the conflict in Ukraine. Daniel Rao reports.
During the talks, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said she is determined to counter challenges from US subsidies for green technologies. That's in addition to speeding up a currently blocked law on phasing out combustion engines in the European Union from 2035. Von der Leyen said the US Inflation Reduction Act would bring huge tax breaks for clean technologies made in the United States. She said European electric car makers had been given access to US tax advantages, but the EU needed to ensure they also benefited in the batteries and battery component segments. Von der Leyen added that European legislative action within a fortnight would propose to unleash European aid and funds so far not used for the green transition in EU member states. Commenting on the delay to ending sales of new CO2-emitting cars in the EU in 2035 after Germany questioned its support for the policy, the European Commission President said the issues could be resolved. According to German Transport Minister Volker Wissing, the proposal promised by the EU Commission detailing how climate-friendly fuels could be used in internal combustion engines after 2035, and not only in small quantities, is still missing. The pair also warned China not to supply weapons to Russia as Moscow continues its attempts to make gains on the battlefield in eastern Ukraine, and that the EU is closely monitoring the situation. Von der Leyen stressed, however, that so far there is no evidence that Beijing is doing so. Daniel Rao, TVB News.
Still ahead, a man accused of assisting Abby Choi's ex-husband in his attempt to flee the city appears in court. The Hong Kong Birdwatching Society says about 200 birds collided with buildings between September and December last year. To resolve forced labor dispute with Japan met with protests on the streets of Seoul. Welcome back. A man accused of assisting the ex-husband of murdered model Abby Choi in his attempt to flee the city by boat appeared in court today. No plea was taken and the defendant was granted bail. Timothy Lee has more.
41-year-old Lam Shun, an employee of a yacht company, was arrested in Sheungwan last week on suspicion of criminal facilitation. This morning, with his head covered and in handcuffs, he was brought to court by the police. Lam was charged with assisting Alex Kwong, who was charged with murdering his ex-wife Abby Choi and his planned escape to Macau on the 24th of last month. The court was told that Lam was paid $300,000. The magistrate adjourned the case until the 8th of May.
The 41-year-old man suspected of assisting Alex Kwong's planned escape by boat appeared at the Kowloon City Magistracy this morning. He was granted $50,000 bail but banned from leaving Hong Kong. He is also required to report to the police twice a week.
Last month, 28-year-old model Abby Choi was murdered and dismembered in one of the city's most high-profile and gruesome murder cases. As of now, authorities have arrested 6 individuals, with 5 having been prosecuted. They included 28-year-old ex-husband Alex Kwong, who remained in hiding and was arrested by the police at Tongsheng Pier on the 25th of last month. Also charged with murder are his 31-year-old brother, who was previously hired as Choi's personal driver, and his 65-year-old father. Kwong's 63-year-old mother, who was suspected to have destroyed information relevant to the case 2 days after Choi's murder, was charged with perverting the course of justice. The family remains remanded in custody. The 47-year-old mistress of Kwong's father, who was suspected to have harbored Kwong, was also arrested but later released on police bail. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The Hong Kong Birdwatching Society said about 200 birds collided with buildings between September and December last year, killing 179 and injuring 17. The organization said 7 of the birds were conservation-level species, including the critically endangered yellow-breasted bunting and the national near-threatened lanceolated warbler. The group said the collisions were caused by mainly by mirror-like glass surfaces on new buildings that create an illusion for birds by reflecting natural landscapes. To tackle the issue, the Society hopes the government can introduce legislation that requires buildings with glass surfaces to install anti-bird collision material. South Korea today announced a plan under which its own companies would compensate people forced to work under Japan's 1910 to 1945 occupation. The plan seeks to end a decades-long dispute and present a unified front against China and North Korea. The two countries are reportedly arranging for a summit between South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida for later this month. A protest erupted in Seoul where some South Koreans accuse their government of selling out to Japan. Nazvi Karim reports.
The sign says President Yoon Suk-yeol should suspend its humiliating pro-Japan diplomacy. As politicians try to put a painful episode in Korea-Japan relations behind them in the name of maintaining regional peace, a section of the South Korean population will not forget. South Korea today announced a plan to resolve a dispute over forced labor and military brothels during Japan's 1910 to 1945 occupation of Korea. The agreement calls for South Korea to compensate former forced laborers via a public foundation funded by private sector companies with no obligations from Japanese entities. South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin said in a press conference that two countries needed to end the vicious cycle for the national interest for the people. The plan is backed by US President Joe Biden, who wants to strengthen trilateral relations, with all three countries seeing North Korea and China as a threat. In Tokyo, Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi said Japan appreciates South Korea's announcement. Japan has long refused to pay a cent in compensation, maintaining that its obligations were fulfilled by a 1965 diplomatic treaty in which Tokyo provided hundreds of millions of dollars in economic aid. In 2018, South Korea's Supreme Court ordered Japanese firms to pay reparations, money that remains outstanding. A year later, Japan retaliated by slapping export controls on chemicals crucial to South Korea's semiconductor industry, prompting Seoul to file a complaint with the World Trade Organization. That dispute process was halted today, both countries said. But some Koreans are unhappy, saying that government is letting Japan off the hook. Park Seok-woon of the Korean Alliance for Progressive Movement led the protest outside the Foreign Ministry office in Seoul. We protest this pro-Japanese unpatriotic deal, which lacks apology or legal compensation, said Park. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Police in Pakistan served arrest warrants to former Prime Minister Imran Khan Sunday as Khan supporters tried to prevent police from entering his home. Khan is to appear in court on charges of misusing his office to sell state gifts. The Election Commission of Pakistan found the 70-year-old cricket hero turned politician guilty of unlawfully selling gifts from foreign dignitaries. Charges were filed against Khan in an anti-graft court, which last week issued the arrest warrants. This after Khan failed to appear in court despite repeated summons. Khan is required to appear in court on March 7th. If he fails to do so, he will be arrested and brought to court, according to the Interior Minister. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Pearl Magazine is up shortly. Bye for now.